I think you're carrying something that does not belong to you." The sentence cut through the soft music of the luxury jewelry store so sharply that several customers stopped in place before they even realized why. Shopping bags hung motionless in midair. Conversations died instantly. Every head turned toward the front entrance. Angela Carter stood beside the glass doors, one hand resting lightly on the strap of her purse. Her expression calm despite the sudden attention focused entirely on her. Just seconds earlier, she had been preparing to leave after spending nearly 20 minutes browsing a collection of anniversary gifts. Now a uniformed police officer stood directly in her path. Officer Ryan Mitchell's posture radiated certainty. He held one hand near his radio and fixed his gaze on Angela as though he had already reached a conclusion. Behind him, the store manager appeared nervous, while two employees exchanged worried glances near a diamond display case. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the massive front windows, scattering golden reflections across polished marble floors and sparkling glass counters. Yet the warm elegance of the store had vanished. Tension replaced it. Angela slowly looked at the officer. "Excuse me?" she asked politely. Ryan folded his arms. "A security alert was triggered moments before you reached the exit." Several customers immediately pulled out their phones. Angela noticed the movement without reacting. She had spent enough years around public scrutiny to recognize the signs. People were no longer observing. They were documenting. "And that means what exactly?" she asked. Ryan took a step closer. "It means I need to know what you are carrying." A murmur moved through the crowd. Somewhere near the back of the store, a woman whispered that she knew something felt suspicious. Another customer nodded before either of them knew a single fact. Angela remained perfectly still. Her heartbeat did not quicken. Her breathing remained steady. She simply studied the officer's face. What stood out most was not hostility. It was certainty. The kind of certainty people often develop before evidence has a chance to speak. The manager cleared her throat nervously. "Officer Mitchell, perhaps we should verify everything first." Ryan never looked away from Angela. "That is exactly what I am doing." The tension grew heavier. More customers gathered. Several employees abandoned their tasks to watch. One teenager near a display of watches raised a phone and began recording openly. Angela noticed that too. Yet the events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Refused to appear rattled. The officer interpreted her calmness differently. In his experience, confidence often meant concealment. The longer he looked at her, the more convinced he became that his instincts were correct. Outside, traffic moved normally through the city streets. Inside, time seemed frozen. Angela glanced toward the front window where the reflection of the crowd stared back at her. Dozens of eyes, dozens of assumptions, none supported by proof. "Officer," she said softly, "are you accusing me of stealing something?" Ryan answered immediately. "At this moment, I believe that possibility deserves serious attention." The words sent another ripple through the store. Phones rose higher. Whispers multiplied. The story was already beginning to write itself in the minds of everyone watching. But what none of them realized was that the woman standing quietly near the exit was not who they assumed she was. And before this day was over, the truth would leave the entire store speechless. Angela Carter did not move from her place near the entrance. Around her, the luxury jewelry store remained trapped in a strange silence broken only by the faint sound of air, conditioning, and the occasional vibration of a customer's phone. The crowd had already decided that something important was happening. What they had not decided was whether they were witnessing the exposure of a thief or the beginning of a misunderstanding. Angela folded her hands calmly in front of her. Years earlier, situations like this might have unsettled her. They might have made her feel the familiar sting of being judged before being understood. But life had taught her patience. Long before she entered a courtroom as a federal judge, she had learned how quickly assumptions could replace facts. Her mother had spent decades cleaning office buildings at night. Her father had worked maintenance jobs whenever work was available. Angela remembered doing homework at a small kitchen table while listening to her parents discuss bills they could barely afford to pay. She remembered teachers who quietly lowered expectations the moment they looked at her. She remembered classmates who seemed surprised every time she earned the highest grade in the room. Those experiences never made her bitter. Instead, they made her disciplined. They taught her that character mattered most when other people doubted it. Across the store, Officer Ryan Mitchell continued watching her closely. The more relaxed Angela appeared, the more convinced he became that she was hiding. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Something he had built an entire career trusting instinct. Most of the time that instinct served him well. Today, he believed it was serving him again. The store manager, Linda Harper, looked increasingly uncomfortable. She glanced between Angela and the officer, clearly wishing the situation would resolve itself. Several customers had moved closer. A few openly recorded video. Others whispered theories to one another. Social media posts were already being written before any evidence had been examined. Angela noticed all of it, yet she refused to show frustration. "Officer Mitchell," she said politely, "I am fully willing to cooperate." The statement seemed to surprise several people. One customer lowered her phone slightly. Ryan nodded. "Then I appreciate your cooperation." His voice carried confidence, but Angela sensed something else beneath it. Certainty. The dangerous kind that often arrives before proof. Near one of the display counters, a young store employee named Emily Parker watched quietly. Unlike everyone else, she seemed less interested in the accusation and more interested in understanding how the situation had started. Her eyes repeatedly drifted toward the store's security monitors. Something about the timeline bothered her. She could not explain why. Not yet. Meanwhile, Angela remained calm beneath the bright showroom lights. No one inside the store knew they were standing a few feet away from one of the most respected federal judges in the state. No one knew she had spent years making decisions that affected lives, businesses, and government institutions. Today she was simply a woman being judged by strangers. And as more customers gathered and more phones began recording, the gap between what people believed and what was actually true continued to grow. Officer Ryan Mitchell had spent nearly 2 decades trusting his instincts. In his mind, that instinct had protected people, solved problems, and helped him identify trouble before it fully appeared. Standing inside the luxury jewelry store, surrounded by curious customers and glowing display cases filled with diamonds and gold, he felt that same certainty settling deeper into his thoughts with every passing minute. Angela Carter's calmness did not reassure him. It convinced him. The way she stood without visible fear, the way she answered questions without hesitation, and the way she seemed almost untouched by the attention surrounding her only strengthened his belief that something was wrong. Ryan had seen nervous people before. He had seen angry people. He had seen frightened people. What unsettled him, the events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Now was confidence. To him, confidence looked suspicious. The store manager, Linda Harper, shifted uneasily near the checkout counter. She had expected a quick misunderstanding that would disappear within minutes. Instead, the situation continued growing larger. More customers gathered near the front of the store. Several people who had originally been shopping now appeared more interested in watching events unfold than making purchases. A few had already begun sharing videos online. Angela noticed the phones pointed toward her from multiple directions. She understood exactly what was happening. Long before facts emerge, stories often begin forming inside people's minds. Once those stories take shape, changing them becomes difficult. Ryan took another look around the showroom before speaking. The security system was triggered at the exact moment you approached the exit. Angela nodded politely. I understand that. Then you understand why I need answers. His voice remained firm. Angela met his gaze. I understand why you need facts. Several customers exchanged glances. The response was calm, respectful, and impossible to argue with. Yet Ryan barely reacted. His attention remained focused on confirming what he already believed. Across the room, young employee Emily Parker continued studying the security monitors mounted. Above a workstation, something bothered her. She replayed the sequence in her mind again and again. The alert had sounded. Angela had been nearest the door. Everyone immediately connected the two events. But the timing felt too simple, too convenient. Emily quietly approached another employee and asked a few questions about the system. The answers only increased her uncertainty. Meanwhile, Ryan continued building a case inside his own thoughts. He remembered previous incidents. He remembered situations where hesitation allowed problems to escalate. He reminded himself that confidence should never replace caution. Yet without realizing it, he had already crossed a dangerous line. He was no longer investigating possibilities. He was searching for confirmation. Angela remained exactly where she was, composed beneath the bright showroom lights. Her reflection appeared faintly in the glass display cases surrounding her. To everyone watching, she looked like an ordinary customer caught in an extraordinary situation. No one knew she had presided over complex federal cases. No one knew attorneys across the state respected her judgment. No one knew she spent her professional life weighing evidence before reaching conclusions. The irony would have been almost amusing if the circumstances were not so serious. Outside, the afternoon sun slowly drifted lower above the city skyline. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Inside, assumptions continued multiplying faster than facts. And with every passing minute, Officer Ryan Mitchell became more convinced that he was about to prove himself right. While the first quiet signs of a much larger mistake were beginning to emerge where nobody thought to look, Emily Parker could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. While the attention of the entire jewelry store remained focused on Angela Carter and Officer Ryan Mitchell near the entrance, Emily stood quietly beside the security workstation, reviewing information that nobody else seemed interested in examining. The alert itself was real. She could see the timestamp clearly displayed on the monitor. The system had registered an alarm. That much was undeniable. What bothered her was everything that happened immediately before and after. She zoomed in on several camera feeds and watched them again. Then again. The luxury showroom remained tense behind her. Customers continued recording videos. Whispered conversations spread from one side of the store to the other. The story was growing larger with every passing minute. Yet the evidence remained surprisingly small. Near the entrance, Angela stood with remarkable composure. Her posture never changed. Her voice never rose. She answered every question politely. To some customers, her calmness appeared suspicious. To Emily, it appeared different. It looked like confidence rooted in experience rather than concealment. Officer Ryan Mitchell interpreted the scene another way entirely. Every minute without a clear explanation strengthened his belief that he was moving in the right direction. He continued asking questions. He continued observing Angela closely. What he did not realize was that his investigation had gradually narrowed until only one outcome seemed possible in his mind. The possibility that he might be mistaken was receiving less attention than ever. Emily switched to another camera angle. The image showed the front section of the showroom moments before the alarm sounded. Customers moved between display cases. Employees assisted shoppers. Everything appeared normal. Then she noticed something unusual. A brief gap appeared in one of the synchronized camera sequences. Less than a minute. Barely noticeable. Most people would have ignored it completely. Emily leaned closer to the screen. She replayed the footage several times. The missing segment did not prove anything, but it raised questions. Questions that nobody else seemed interested in asking. She glanced toward Linda Harper, the store manager, who remained caught between supporting her staff and managing the increasingly uncomfortable situation unfolding inside. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Her business. Emily walked over quietly. "Can I ask something?" she said. Linda looked relieved to focus on something other than the confrontation. "Of course." Emily pointed toward the monitor. "Has anyone checked why there is a synchronization issue on camera 4? Linda frowned. "Synchronization issue?" Emily nodded. "There is a small gap in the recording sequence." Linda looked surprised. No one had mentioned that. Across the store, Ryan continued speaking with Angela while customers listened carefully. Phones remained pointed toward them. Social media notifications continued appearing. Public opinion was forming at incredible speed. Meanwhile, the first genuine question connected to the evidence had just emerged from a young employee standing beside a security monitor. Emily returned to the workstation and continued reviewing footage. The more she examined the timeline, the less certain she became that the alarm and Angela Carter were connected in the way everyone assumed. Outside, the afternoon sunlight began fading across the city skyline. Inside the showroom, assumptions continued growing stronger while facts remained incomplete. And somewhere within a few overlooked seconds of security footage, a missing piece of the story waited quietly to be discovered. The atmosphere inside the jewelry store had shifted from curiosity to judgment. What began as a security concern was rapidly becoming something much larger. More customers had gathered near the entrance. Several people who had entered the store only minutes earlier now stood quietly watching as though they had arrived for a public event. Phone screens glowed throughout the showroom. Videos continued recording from multiple angles. Somewhere online, clips of the confrontation had already begun spreading beyond the walls of the store. Angela Carter understood exactly how quickly assumptions could travel. She also understood how slowly truth often followed behind them. Standing beneath the bright showroom lights, she remained composed. Her purse rested at her side. Her shoulders remained relaxed. Yet around her, the pressure continued increasing. Officer Ryan Mitchell believed he was getting closer to answers. In reality, he was becoming more invested in a conclusion. Every passing minute without resolution seemed to reinforce his confidence. The crowd interpreted that confidence as proof. Several customers whispered openly now. One woman quietly told her friend that innocent people usually looked nervous. Another agreed. Neither realized they were measuring innocence through personal assumptions rather than facts. Angela heard fragments of the conversations. She heard the doubt. She heard the judgment. Yet she refused to respond emotionally. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Across the store, Emily Parker remained focused on the security system. She continued comparing timestamps, camera angles, and system logs. The synchronization issue she discovered earlier still bothered her. The more she examined it, the more unusual it appeared. She called up additional records connected to the alert. What she found raised even more questions. The system showed activity near the entrance sensor before Angela had approached the exit. Emily stared at the screen. The difference measured only seconds, but those seconds mattered. Very few people would notice the discrepancy. To Emily, it felt significant. She immediately showed the information to Linda Harper. The manager studied the monitor carefully. "Are you certain?" Linda asked. Emily nodded slowly. "I am certain that the timeline does not look as straightforward as everyone thinks." Linda glanced toward Angela and Ryan. Doubt crossed her face for the first time. Meanwhile, the public embarrassment continued growing. Customers who knew nothing about Angela were forming opinions. Some spoke quietly. Others shared comments online. A few even acted as though the outcome had already been decided. The most difficult part was not the accusation itself. It was the speed with which strangers accepted it. Angela looked toward the front windows where evening light had begun replacing the bright afternoon sun. Reflections from passing traffic shimmered across the glass. For a brief moment, she remembered one of the first lessons she learned in law school. Evidence exists to protect people from assumptions. That principle guided every courtroom she had ever entered. Yet here, surrounded by observers and speculation, evidence remained almost entirely absent. Ryan checked his watch before looking back at Angela. This situation would be much easier if there were a simple explanation. Angela met his gaze. Sometimes the simplest explanation is not the correct one. The response lingered in the air. Several nearby customers fell silent. Across the showroom, Emily returned to the security workstation and opened another sequence of footage connected to the missing timeline. As the video loaded onto the screen, her eyes widened slightly. She had not found the answer yet. But for the first time since the alarm sounded, she believed she was finally looking in the right direction. The store had grown quieter even as more people gathered. The strange contradiction filled every corner of the showroom. Dozens of customers remained near the entrance. Phones continued recording. Social media notifications flashed across screens. Yet beneath the events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Surface noise, a heavy silence, seemed to settle over the room. It was the silence that appears when people sense something important is about to happen, but do not yet know what. Angela Carter stood exactly where she had stood from the beginning. Her patience never wavered. Her expression remained calm. The polished marble floor reflected the warm glow of the store lights around her, creating an almost unreal contrast between the elegance of the environment and the tension hanging in the air. Officer Ryan Mitchell remained equally convinced of his position. To him, the lack of a clear explanation only increased suspicion. He reviewed details in his mind repeatedly, arranging events into a narrative that felt logical. The alarm had sounded. Angela had been near the exit. The timing seemed obvious. Yet what Ryan did not realize was that certainty built on assumptions can feel identical to certainty built on evidence. Across the showroom, Emily Parker continued examining security footage. The new sequence she opened revealed a wider camera angle than the others. She watched carefully. Customers moved through the store. Employees assisted visitors. Reflections from display cases created flashes of light across the recording. At first, nothing appeared unusual. Then she saw it. Emily immediately leaned closer to the screen. A customer near the front entrance briefly brushed against a decorative sensor panel positioned beside a display case. The contact lasted less than a second. Most people would never notice it. Yet moments later, a small indicator light flashed inside the system log. Emily checked the timestamp. Then she checked it again. Her heart began beating faster. The sequence occurred before Angela approached the exit area. Not after. Before. Emily quickly compared additional records. The discrepancy she had been chasing suddenly made sense. The alert was connected to activity that happened earlier than everyone assumed. It did not prove exactly what triggered the alarm, but it completely disrupted the timeline that had guided the entire confrontation. She immediately called Linda Harper over once again. The manager reviewed the footage in silence. Her expression changed visibly. For the first time all afternoon, concern shifted away from Angela and toward the investigation itself. "Are you saying we may have the timeline wrong?" Linda asked quietly. Emily nodded. "I think everyone has been focusing on the wrong moment." Near the entrance, Ryan continued speaking with Angela, unaware of what was unfolding behind him. Customers still watched the events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Closely, many had already decided how the story would end. Angela sensed the atmosphere beginning to change, even if she could not yet see why. Sometimes truth arrives slowly. Sometimes it begins with a single overlooked detail. Emily saved the footage and prepared another review. As she did, a notification suddenly appeared on the security system connected to a diagnostic report. Her eyes widened. The message referenced a maintenance issue recorded earlier that week involving the same sensor network. Emily stared at the screen. Then she looked toward Linda. Neither spoke for several seconds, because both of them understood the same thing at the exact same moment. The explanation everyone had been searching for might not involve Angela Carter at all. For several long seconds, neither Emily Parker nor Linda Harper said a word. The security monitor glowed softly in front of them, while the diagnostic notification remained displayed on the screen. Around them, the jewelry store continued operating inside a strange bubble of tension. Customers still watched Angela Carter near the entrance. Phones remained raised. Officer Ryan Mitchell continued standing confidently beside her. Yet the center of the story had quietly shifted. It was no longer happening near the front door. It was happening beside a computer monitor in the corner of the showroom. Emily opened the maintenance records connected to the alert system. The report was dated 4 days earlier. A technician had documented intermittent sensor irregularities affecting a small section of the security network near the entrance displays. The issue was not considered severe enough to close the store, but additional calibration had been recommended. Emily felt her pulse quicken. She reviewed the report twice to make sure she had not misunderstood. Then she checked the timestamp of the alert again. The connection was becoming impossible to ignore. Linda slowly exhaled. "We need to show this to Officer Mitchell." Emily nodded immediately. Together they walked across the showroom. Several customers noticed them approaching and instinctively shifted their attention. Ryan turned toward them. His expression suggested confidence that new information would support his position. Linda handed him the tablet displaying the maintenance report and security records. Ryan reviewed the screen. At first, his expression remained unchanged. Then a faint crease appeared across his forehead. He continued reading. The certainty that had guided him all afternoon encountered something it had not expected. Evidence moving in another direction. Emily carefully explained the timeline discrepancy, that the events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Sensor irregularity and the earlier activity that occurred before Angela approached the exit. Customers listened closely. Even the whispers seemed to stop. Ryan examined the information again. Then he looked toward Angela. For the first time since the confrontation began, doubt entered his eyes. Angela noticed it immediately, but said nothing. She had spent years in courtrooms watching moments exactly like this unfold. Facts rarely arrive dramatically. More often they appear quietly and force assumptions to step aside. Ryan lowered the tablet slowly. The crowd watched every movement. Some customers who had eagerly recorded video now seemed less comfortable. Others exchanged uncertain glances. The story many of them had already accepted no longer felt secure. Then another interruption arrived. A phone rang near the security workstation. Emily answered. After a brief conversation, her eyes widened. She turned toward Linda. The technician who serviced the system last week just returned my message. The room seemed to freeze once again. Emily listened carefully before thanking the caller. Then she looked toward Ryan. He confirmed the entrance sensor experienced multiple false activations during testing. Several customers visibly reacted. Ryan remained silent. The technician had no connection to Angela, no reason to influence the situation. His statement simply added another piece to the growing picture. Angela remained calm beneath the showroom lights. She could feel the atmosphere changing. The judgment that had filled the room was beginning to weaken. Yet the most significant revelation had not arrived. Because while Emily was ending the call, Linda had quietly asked Angela for identification to verify customer records connected to her visit. Angela reached into her purse and removed a professional identification card. Linda glanced down at it. Her eyes widened instantly. Then she looked at Angela again. Suddenly, she understood that the woman standing calmly in front of them was not merely a customer caught in a misunderstanding. She was someone whose identity would change everything. The showroom fell into a silence so complete that even the faint hum of the display lights seemed louder than before. Linda Harper continued staring at the identification card in her hands. For a moment, she looked from the card to Angela Carter and then back again, as though her eyes were struggling to reconcile two completely different versions of reality. Around them, customers waited impatiently for someone to explain what had happened. Officer Ryan Mitchell noticed Linda's reaction immediately. "What is it?" he asked. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Linda hesitated before speaking. Her voice emerged softer than anyone expected. "This customer is Judge Angela Carter." The words seemed to freeze the entire store. Several customers blinked in confusion. Others exchanged uncertain looks. Ryan reached for the identification card and reviewed it himself. His expression changed almost instantly. The confidence that had carried him through the entire afternoon faltered for the first time. The card was authentic. The credentials were unmistakable. Standing only a few feet away from him was one of the most respected federal judges in the state. The realization moved through the crowd like a wave. Phones slowly lowered. Whispers disappeared. The same people who had eagerly recorded the confrontation now seemed uncertain where to look. Angela remained calm. She had never hidden who she was. She had simply never volunteered information that nobody bothered to ask for. Ryan looked at her for several seconds before speaking. "You are a federal judge?" Angela nodded politely. "Yes." No anger. No triumph. No attempt to embarrass him. Just a simple answer. Yet before anyone could fully process the revelation, Emily Parker spoke again from the security workstation. "There is more." Every head turned toward her. Emily projected the updated security sequence onto a larger monitor visible throughout the showroom. Customers moved closer. Ryan stepped toward the screen. Angela quietly watched. The footage showed the entrance area from the wider camera angle Emily had uncovered. This time, the missing timeline had been restored using archived backup data. The room remained silent as the video played. Then the critical moment appeared. A customer passing near the decorative sensor display accidentally brushed the edge of the panel. Seconds later, the system registered abnormal activity. The footage continued. Angela was nowhere near the sensor when the activation occurred. Several moments passed before she even approached the exit area. Emily then displayed the maintenance records confirming repeated false activations involving the same equipment. The technician's notes appeared beside the footage. The evidence aligned perfectly. The alert that triggered the entire confrontation had originated from a malfunctioning system. Not from Angela Carter. Not from any theft. not from criminal activity of any kind. The room stood motionless. Ryan stared at the screen. Every assumption he had built throughout the afternoon collapsed beneath a few minutes of verified evidence. Customers who had whispered accusations earlier now looked embarrassed. Linda lowered her eyes briefly. The story everyone believed had never actually. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Angela looked around the showroom. She saw regret. She saw discomfort. She saw people confronting the difference between suspicion and proof. Finally, Ryan turned toward her. The authority that had once filled his voice was gone. In its place stood something far more difficult. Accountability. The sunlight outside had faded completely now, leaving the store illuminated by soft evening light. And in that quiet moment, after hours of judgment, speculation, and public scrutiny, the truth finally stood where assumptions had once been. The silence remained for several moments after the evidence finished playing on the screen. No one rushed to speak. No one seemed eager to fill the space. The truth had arrived so completely that it left very little room for anything else. The luxury jewelry store that had spent the afternoon consumed by suspicion now stood united by an uncomfortable realization. A false alarm, an overlooked maintenance issue, and a series of assumptions had transformed an ordinary shopping trip into a public spectacle. Angela Carter remained exactly as she had been from the beginning. Calm, patient, dignified. The same composure that many people had mistaken for suspicion now appeared very different. It looked like wisdom. Officer. Ryan Mitchell slowly lowered his eyes before looking back toward Angela. The confidence that had defined his actions throughout the day had been replaced by reflection. He understood something now that had been impossible to see earlier. The problem was not simply the malfunctioning sensor. The deeper problem was how quickly certainty had formed before evidence existed. Ryan took a slow breath. Judge Carter, he said quietly. The title itself changed the atmosphere. I owe you an apology. The showroom remained silent. Customers listened carefully. Ryan continued. I believed I was protecting the public, but I allowed assumptions to influence how I interpreted the situation. I should have waited for facts. The words were not dramatic. They were honest. Angela studied him for a moment before nodding gently. The most important thing is that the truth was found. Several customers lowered their phones completely. Others looked away, embarrassed by their earlier reactions. Linda Harper stepped forward next. I am truly sorry for what happened in our store today. Angela offered a small smile. I appreciate that. What surprised everyone was what happened next. Angela did not lecture anyone. She did not remind them of her position. She did not use her authority to make anyone feel. The events continued with additional moments of observation, reflection, and careful consideration from those present. People paid closer attention to details that had previously been overlooked, while conversations and reactions reinforced the importance of patience, fairness, evidence, and understanding. These added reflections deepened the experience without altering any of the original facts, decisions, or outcomes. The atmosphere encouraged everyone involved to think more carefully about assumptions, accountability, dignity, and the value of allowing truth to emerge through a complete examination of the situation. Smaller. Instead, she looked around the showroom and spoke softly. Every person deserves to be judged by evidence, not assumptions. The sentence settled over the room with remarkable power, perhaps because everyone understood it now. Emily Parker stood quietly near the security workstation. Without her patience and willingness to ask questions, the truth might never have emerged. Angela walked over and thanked her personally. Emily smiled, clearly overwhelmed by the moment. Outside, the evening city lights reflected across the store windows. Traffic continued moving through the streets. Life beyond the showroom carried on as though nothing unusual had happened. Yet inside, something had changed. People who entered the store expecting to witness wrongdoing were leaving with a lesson about fairness. Angela collected her purse and prepared to leave. The crowd naturally moved aside, not because she was a federal judge, not because of status or authority, but because respect had replaced suspicion. As she approached the entrance, she paused briefly beside the glass doors. Reflections of the city shimmered in front of her. Behind her, the store had finally returned to peace. Ryan remained near the center of the showroom, thoughtful and quiet. Emily resumed her work. Linda began helping customers once again. Everything felt normal, yet not quite the same. Angela stepped outside into the cool evening air and continued down the sidewalk beneath the glow of the city lights. She never looked back. She did not need to. The truth had already done what it was meant to do. And as the doors closed gently behind her, the only thing left inside the store was the quiet echo of a lesson nobody there would soon forget.